Let's look at this painting by Watteau. So it was done, I would say, roughly about 150 years ago, before the portrait by Renoir that I talked about in my last video. I'll make the case that it's not just the subject matter that is similar, but it's also the elements that I talked about in the painting yesterday, the movement from front to back in color and value, the movement around the surface that was in Renoir's portrait. This is also quite clear in Watteau's painting. The dark midtone spiraling from the upper left down into the lower right that is doing that movement from the back to the front. You also have that same quality in the blue that exists in the sky in the background, pushing forward through the water into the colors in the apron. You have a painting where it's largely neutral midtones that sort of swim around the painting, and then the lighter and more colorful moments are moving around the center. And within the large midtone movements in the painting, there's this movement back and forth within those larger movements of warm and cool. You can see this sort of grayish moving towards almost blue, pulsating against this sort of gray, brown, dark brown. So you have the movement from upper left to lower right of the darker, warm midtone, and then the sort of movement from back to front as well of the lighter blue. And then it's interesting to see how the figure itself sort of counters both of those movements in its whole form. How the red of the skirt sort of counters the blue of the blue movement forward, and then you also have how the movement, literally the tilting of the figure, sort of goes in the opposite direction of the movement of the dark movement from upper left to lower right. There's more I can say about this painting, but I just wanted to bring it in because in some ways it's so similar to the painting from yesterday, and it sort of consolidates the points I was making about Renoir's portrait. And now let's look at this painting by Watteau. Much of the same elements I brought up when talking about the Renoir painting, this last Watteau painting, are in play now in this work by Watteau. I want to emphasize something in particular in this work. There's this great momentum built from the upper left into the, essentially the figure in the yellow dress, the woman in the yellow dress. And it sort of, this crescendo sort of pushes out from the back to the front into that figure, and it's almost like the rest of the painting sort of absorbs this very large movement. It's like the painting itself exists just for the sake of absorbing this movement. For example, the blue in the woman's dress is sort of aligned with the blue in the mountains, the blue in the sky. The yellow in the woman's dress is aligned with the yellow foliage in the background. You can see the movement of the dark value, the dark green, is in other places in the painting on the left and on the right, and sort of flows over, creating sort of a circular, two-dimensional alignment that helps, again, absorb this huge movement that, again, goes from upper left to lower right. And let me just repeat that the large upper left to right movement is primarily, it exists sort of two-dimensionally, but it's primarily a three-dimensional movement, and the other qualities I've alluded to are two-dimensional. They sort of bring the painting together. The blue in the background and the blue in the foreground sort of compress the painting. The yellow in the dress and the yellow in the foliage compress the painting, where the large movement sort of pushes it apart. I'll put a link in the video description for my friend Paul Rhodes' painting analysis of Titian's Rape of Europa. It's a very similar idea where you have this alignment, and there's variation within it, but it sort of shoots through the painting, and it's as if they were planes stacked in momentum. Or even better yet, imagine this movement as sort of like dominoes falling towards into the figure. That's the main event. I mean, there's all these really wonderful things happening, and I love Watteau's draftsmanship and the drama and the, and I'm not blind to the elements of mystery in this painting, the sort of mysterious sculpture that's staring at us. But the elements I'm focusing on are sort of part of the initial construction. This is a page from a book by Sheldon Chaney, who wrote a book called Expressionism in Art, and it's showing the sort of qualities of, it's almost like these value steps are like cards or two-dimensional boxes that sort of stack themselves within the painting. This book was incredibly influential in the 30s, 40s, and 50s. This book was at the top of Hans Hoffman's recommended reading list for his school. Hans Hoffman was the leading modernist pedagogue in the 30s, 40s, 50s, and early 60s. And this book was incredibly influential. I don't know another art book that would contend with it. Maybe for the neo-academics, the classical realists, the sort of Harold Speed, or for illustrators, Andrew Loomis. And anyway, he talks about these same concepts, and again, it's just sort of momentum built up with value. Here's the book. This poor thing only has one review on Amazon, but it, once upon a time, was incredibly influential in artistic circles, and I think it's worth exploring the arguments it puts forth. Maybe I'll make a video at some point about this book, even though I haven't really read it as well as I'd like to. But anyway, I think that little diagram he had is sort of gets my point across about this sort of stacking of values, almost like the cards, one on top of another, to create momentum that ends in this figure, this yellow, that's both a figure and a color, just a color itself. And I don't mean to dismiss or downplay the other aspects that make this painting work, like the draftsmanship. I mean, look, this is the portrait on the left is the figure in blue. I mean, look how beautiful this is. And there's much to be said about how he puts a figure together, or sort of how it seems to me the issues that concern him when he's drawing, because they're not, even though they're so full of life, there's qualities in them that are very not lifelike. So here on the left is the figure, the woman sort of grabbing the foliage or grabbing fruit. And his drawings here, he plays it so fast and loose, yet they hold together and have so much movement and character. And again, at some point I'll discuss my thoughts on drawing and how, my attempts to sort of approach this form of drawing on my own. And I want to stress that I think his draftsmanship plays a huge role, especially Watteau in his own paintings. But I feel that as great a draftsman that he is, these qualities where the values are sort of interlaced, almost like a basket to absorb this really large movement moving from one corner to the other, and how it just, the richness of it all coming together. And there are paintings of his that again have his beautiful draftsmanship, but the painting itself doesn't sort of fit, and so it becomes, these paintings look very good in details, but they don't come together the way this painting comes together, or even in the way the last Watteau, the portrait in the beginning of the video, or the Renoir. And let me just repeat one more time, I feel that these aspects I'm trying to bring forth in the paintings are just so foundational, and they cannot be viewed as advanced or sort of particular to a specific period of art. I mean, this is sort of what makes art art, and if it's very important that from the beginning, as we try to make paintings and look at paintings, we see things first from this point of view. And let me end on the comment I made on my last video on Renoir's portrait, because I think it is very relevant to what I've been discussing for this video. These basic qualities I highlight are the backbone of the painting, Renoir's painting, without which this portrait would not become a work of art. Let me mention as well that I am convinced these qualities must exist at the beginning of any work of art, and that one cannot simply mechanically or expressively draw a portrait and then shoehorn in separately the elements of movements of color and value that I bring up in the video. Thus, it is important as students, and we are all students, to study these phenomena as being welded together, the color with the form, the front and the back, the surface and the space. A daunting task, but I see no other way forward.